Hello, welcome to CMC Presents, a series of chamber music vignettes presented by the Chamber Music Conference. My name is Phillip Bush. I'm a pianist, and I've had an association with the Chamber Music Conference for about 13 years now. And I'm very happy to be speaking with you all today on one of a series of chamber music topics that CMC is presenting through these videos. My topic that I would like to talk about today, just briefly, is especially addressed to those among you who are pianists like myself and who are avid players of chamber music, also like myself. And that's a topic which I would call internalizing the other parts of the music. And some of what I'm going to say to you may seem redundant and maybe a little obvious, but it's something that's worth thinking about really nonstop. Everybody in chamber music has to think about this to some extent, but I think we as pianists who perhaps have come up in our studies playing a lot of solo repertoire and not having to think about it so much, this is something we have to maybe work a little bit harder at than perhaps some of our colleagues who might have been more used to playing with other players from earlier in their training. It's something that I talk about really incessantly and nonstop with the university chamber music students that I coach in groups, especially the pianists. And so let me talk about what does that really mean, internalizing the other parts? Well, as you've probably been told if you've ever attended the Chamber Music Conference or been coached by professionals in chamber music, you have been told, no doubt, to study the score and really know all the other parts, understand what's going on at all times in the other parts, not just your own. And that's, of course, true. But I think it has to go a little bit beyond that. And studying the score sort of intellectually and making notes in your part, that's great. But there has to be actually kind of a process of absorbing the other parts and almost believing that you are playing all the parts, or especially the key parts of music at any given time in a chamber music piece. That's why I refer to it not just as knowing the score, but internalizing the score, internalizing the other parts. So what does that mean a little bit? Well, I'm taking a couple of examples. There's different ways to think about this, and I probably could have thought of better examples, but these just sort of popped into my head, and I had the music out fairly high on my stack of music in my office, so I decided to go ahead with these. I'm talking about the slow movement first of the Brahms C minor piano quartet, opus 60. And of course the slow movement is not at all in C minor, but in E major. It starts, as you probably know, with this gorgeous cello solo. It is really a duet between the cello and the piano. If you are just looking at the piano part, right, you sort of see a bass line and a kind of in the right hand, kind of an interior accompaniment part. And that sounds, pretty good on its own. But obviously, what's important for you as the pianist to do is to react and collaborate with the melody, which is in this case, of course, the cello. One thing that you can do in a situation like this, and of course, what are the things that the cello is going to do with the melody that are not just strictly metric, right? Well, it has to do a lot with key pitches when certain notes have a certain juiciness within the harmonic texture, but also the kind of the intervallic relationship, right? And that's something that's really difficult for us as pianists to think about, the physicality of intervals. Because I'll give you an example. Let's take the later on in the melody of the cello. I'll play the melody in the cello. So that rise to that high B. right? You know, on the piano, it's kind of, you know, it takes about this much space and you're basically just pushing these buttons down, right? But if you're playing on the cello, you're going up high on the A string, you're really traversing some distance, right? Um, uh, the same way if you were singing it, you would feel physically the effort to go from the low note to the high note. And that's not just the high note, but it's, I think it's kind of the highest note maybe in that whole passage. So it has an extra specialness to it. There's a physicality to it. And that's something that we as pianists have to strive to sort of create. When we play solo music, we have to sort of manufacture that out of thin air. Because basically, for us, it's no big deal to go, you know, it's pushing 4 buttons that are like this far apart. Playing the part, perhaps with your, let's say the bass line, let's say playing the cello part with it is one way where you could maybe feel what it might be like to play that part. And that's very helpful too. But I think that the really essential activity to do as in terms of internalizing a part and thinking about what the needs of the melody are is to actually sing it. And it doesn't matter if you can't sing. I cannot sing at all. I'm famous in my family for having the worst voice in history, or among my piano students who hear me sing constantly. But I use that as a lesson to them, in that, you know, you don't have to be a good singer to sing, but the physicality of feeling what the line does, right? So da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee and did you hear what I did in that one measure? A little breath, whether it's a literal breath or just a phrasing point, right? And of course, this is what wind players do and singers do naturally. Or for strings, might be a bow change at that point or whatever, but a feeling of a phrasing. The importance of that, of doing that physical manifestation of the melody that's not in your part, is that you now sort of feel a bit of what it's like, what it's all about, that part, what it takes to play that part. And what that means is that when you are playing, you know, just the accompaniment in this part, you're not just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're not just listening. You know, we talk about, oh, listen to your collaborators. Well, that's good, but listening is not enough, because if you're listening, sometimes you're just reacting. And if you're reacting, you might be just a slight bit late to what's actually happening. So you have to sort of simultaneously be playing that part in your heart and mind and soul, along with your partner or partners. And that's what I mean about internalizing the music. The reason that's important is that then you sort of know, it's as if you are playing the part yourself. So if the cellist, for example, takes a little extra time or moves forward, let's say the opposite way in a certain passage, you've internalized that part so much that you're no longer reacting. You're reacting only in the sense that your right hand might react to your left hand, or vice versa as a pianist. You're completely seamless. You're completely one with your collaborator. And if they move forward here, and then from that G natural to the G sharp. So that's kind of what I mean about internalizing the music. And that, of course, can go in a part of the score where there's multiple things going on, but perhaps you're doing that especially with whatever might be the primary part at that moment. And of course, sometimes you, the pianist, are the primary part. You're playing the melody, and your colleagues have to do the same thing really with your melody as well. So that's what chamber music is all about. And I know that may seem kind of obvious, but for pianists, I think that idea of singing the part is extremely important. So you have a sort of physical sense of what that part requires. And then when you play with it, you're not just counting, you're not just listening, but you're internalizing. Another version of that might be something a little bit more rhythmic based, a little bit more complex, where maybe the timing is important, but you don't have to necessarily sing the pitches because it might be too difficult to try to sing the pitches if they're really fast. I've been thinking a little bit about the Shostakovich piano quintet lately. It was actually a piece that I was supposed to play right before the pandemic hit. So that concert was unfortunately canceled, but I did have the music still out on my piano. So I was just thinking about a couple of spots in that as well that require that kind of internalization, a different kind of internalization. There's a spot in the first movement, actually a couple of spots that I was thinking about. One is there's a sort of a 8-bar passage where the 4 strings, the string quartet is alone, kind of playing very condensed parts, interlocking rhythms. It's in 3/8, at this point a fairly fast 3/8 meter. And they take a retard, a sort of group retard that leads into a grand return of kind of some of the opening music in a slower tempo where the piano alone has the downbeat and the strings then have to bounce off that. So, as a pianist, you could do one of two things, or a couple of things. You could count the 9 bars rest, this is coming into it. You could just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But they have a retard at the end of it, and so you might count a slower 1, 2, 3. But you have to somehow make your downbeat completely seamless and natural and obvious outcome of their retard. So how do you do that? Here the answer we have, of course, in the what it is between sort of all 4 strings, this interlocking rhythm. Piano, right? So what you have to do in that sense, of course, is obviously study the score, see how the parts interlock, do something like I did in terms of maybe playing a bit of the parts to see what that feels like, especially that retarded the last 2 bars between the sort of, it's the second violin and the first violin, creating this sort of compound retard. But the other thing you can do is also sing the parts, especially the composite rhythm. You don't have to sing all the parts. You can't sing all the parts, but you can sing the compound rhythm. And again, that's a feature of internalizing it, so that when you play it for real, you're not just counting the bars, you're not just listening to the quartet, but you are internalizing actually all the parts. In this case, of course, I'm not singing pitches. I'm just going to kind of do syllabic things on the rhythmic pattern. So from that 9-bar passage leading into the downbeat that I have to play, da 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 dee da da dee da dee da da dee da da dee da da dee da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dee da 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 dee da ba 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 ba. So you see what I did there? I just did syllabic sort of rhythmic counting. But again, it physicalizes it, it internalizes it. So when I'm listening to it, I'm not just listening to them, but I'm actually I feel like I'm playing all the parts myself. And so that my downbeat is the natural outcome of what they're doing. Deem ba da da dee da dee da dee da dee. And that's one of the grand, really important moments of that first movement. Even a passage right after that, where sort of this grand material from the opening of the piece is answered between sort of canonically between the piano and the string quartet is something where you could just play it very rhythmically and count and probably come out more or less okay. But again, if you sing along the other parts, then when you play it together, you're going to be much more attuned to what's going on in the group at the same time as what you're playing, which means that you've now, what? Internalized their music. So again, you see, I'm not making any attempt to sing actual pitches, but I'm just sort of syllabically or intoning some kind of pitch, some kind of sound in the rhythm that the strings are playing. So that, again, I'm internalizing it. And when I'm playing it, I don't think about counting. I don't thinking about just listening to them. I'm thinking about as if I'm playing all the parts. That way, if there's some, and this is a really important point, if there's some slightly different thing about what the strings or the solo string at this given moment might do, a little timing thing, a little bit of it, placing it slightly earlier or slightly later or moving forward or being more emphatic, whatever the thing that your colleagues are doing, you're not locked in your box and oblivious to it, or you're also not just reacting to it and trying to sort of catch up to it. You have internalized, so you're ready for all those possibilities, And I think that with practice, this sort of makes you a more and more seamless collaborator in terms of cooperating, because we so often talk about, count is important and listen and know the parts and so forth. But internalizing the parts are very important, and especially singing is great because, as I was saying before, sort of sometimes the intervallic significance of a certain spot in the melody is something that you can only feel if you physicalize that. If string players, of course, they've got to make the shift. Wind players feel that too. Singers certainly feel that. And if you sing, you will feel that physically, the difference between you'll feel that, that difference, the effortfulness of that interval. Whereas on piano, it's hard to do that. You have to sort of create that, by smoke and mirrors, because it's just, it's really not a big deal for us. So we have certain wonderful advantages as pianists that we can play 10 or more notes at one time. But there are other things that we don't have available to us that don't come naturally to us, and we have to sort of learn how to do, and that's one of the things. So internalize the other parts. So that's kind of my sermon for today, my spiel, as it were. And what you've heard is just something that I've told chamber music students and pianists especially nonstop for many, many years. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you find it maybe a little bit useful. Again, if you want to find out more about the Chamber Music Conference, please visit our website. It's cmceast.org. That's cmceast.org. And I wish you all a wonderful summer and fall of absorbing music, and hoping that we all get back to playing live music together very, very soon. Thank you.